Welcome to Doc Talks. As you know, Doc Talks is the podcast that is put out by the Knoxville Academy of Medicine, which talks about health issues affecting all East Tennesseans in plain language. I'm Elise Denaney, former president of the Knoxville Academy of Medicine, and I'm here with another former president of the Knoxville Academy of Medicine. And so glad to welcome colleague and friend Dr. Deborah Christensen, who also is the director of the Behavioral and Pediatric Unit at East Tennessee Children's Hospital, also former medical director at Children's Hospital. You wear a lot of hats, girlfriend.
I was chief of staff. I wasn't medical director, so there you go.
It's kind of same difference.
Well, you wear a lot of hats too. So.
Okay, so anyway, we're going to talk about ADHD today. That stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder.
Correct.
Am I correct? Most of us know it by ADHD, and most of us actually know somebody or have a family member who has ADHD. Complicated disease, yeah.
It
Welcome.
can be. Yes, thank you.
So glad you're here. Okay, so tell me a little bit about ADHD.
Wow.
Start off. Kick us off.
Yeah, where do we want to start? You hit it right on the nail when you said probably everybody knows somebody. Every time they do a different study, the numbers climb, and depending on how loosely you apply the criteria, as many as 20% of the population could perhaps have ADHD. It is kind of an integral part of who you are.
I agree.
Yeah. And I guess my basic philosophy is I think all of us have traits. We all have things that are good. We all have things that are bad or that we might perceive as bad, but sometimes that's your perception or that's the situation that you're in. Having a lot of energy, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Sort of depends on the situation. If you're wanting to, go out and get a lot of work done in the yard, having a lot of energy is a good thing. If you need to sit still at a desk all day long, it's not such a good thing. So therein kind of lies some of the difficulty when we talk about ADHD and diagnosis. The three areas that are of concern in ADHD are attention and focus, activity level, and impulse control.
Attention.
Deficit hyperactivity disorder. They don't say either.
So focus. What were the
attention and focus, hyperactivity level, activity level, and impulse control.
Okay.
And used to, they would say ADD if you didn't have hyperactivity, if you just had problems with attention, but that's no longer a term that is technically used. If you don't have hyperactivity and impulsivity and you just have attention problems, we say ADHD and attention predominant. Great big mouthful. It was easier to just say ADD, but whatever. So you look at somebody and you say, does this person have a shorter attention span and more attention problems than other peers their age? That's really important. Over your lifespan, when you're a young child, your attention increases, and then of course when you get to be my age, it's starting to decrease a little bit again from what it was. Those are normal things. So you can't compare the attention span of a 2-year-old to the attention span of a 10-year-old, and because it's not fair. So it has to be developmentally appropriate peers, and it has to be. There's so many things that affect attention too. Are you interested in what you're going to pay attention to? Do you understand what you're going to pay attention to? I can't speak Russian right now, but if I started talking in Russian, you wouldn't be able to pay attention to me because I'm assuming you don't understand Russian. So there's a lot of components of that.
And is maybe that a skill that sometimes, like running a 100-mile dash faster, is that something you can actually get better at?
You probably do. I mean, we do see that. But again, if you want to get better at running a 100-yard dash, you've got to be motivated to want to do that.
Exactly.
And you've got to have some basic abilities there. I'm never going to be a basketball player. I'm just not. It was not in the cards for me, or a famous artist or whatever. So there are some inborn things that are just part of who you are. And so, I think our goal in parenting with any child, though, ought to be to maximize all of the things that they have to maximize that potential. But you look at those three things, that the impulse control, the activity level, and the attention and focus, and you say when you're considering, does this child have that as a diagnosis, How much difficulty do they have compared to their peers? And then a real key element is, okay, just because you're more active than your peers, is that really a problem or not? So does it cause you dysfunction? How much dysfunction does it cause you? And does it cause you dysfunction in more than one setting? At school, at home, on the playground, with your friends, whatever. Because if it's not in multiple settings, maybe that's not really a part of who you are. Maybe it's something to do with that, just that particular setting or something else. So, and as you're, listening to this, you're probably saying, well, there's a lot of subjectivity in this. Unfortunately, there's some basic things that are there that are somewhat objective, but it still a lot of times comes back to the eye of the beholder a little bit.
Right.
And that's why it's really important when you're making a diagnosis to get as many different eyes, as many different people, from teachers to coaches to Sunday school teachers to parents to grandmothers to physicians in the office, to nurses in the office, whoever's there, as many different people seeing that child to have an opinion about, to give you a snapshot of what's going on, because you want to get a full picture and you want to be real clear that that's what's going on, because a lot of things can look like that there's but not really be. If you're talking about not being able to focus, a child who might be extremely dyslexic, for example, and is really struggling, will look like they're not focusing in school in a lot of situations, but it's because reading's hard for them and it's hard to continue to sustain attention when you're not able to do that. And so improving your attention is not necessarily going to make you read any better. It's certainly not going to make you understand Russian if you don't understand Russian, no matter how long you pay attention to it.
If you're a kid, I mean, obviously we're moms and we want our children to be happy and whole and
be the best that they can be. That's always
to be the best that they can be. And so we would get them evaluated for ADHD because we're feeling like that impacts their ability to learn or to participate.
I have three criteria that I really look at, that I look at with my patients, and one is safety. I mean, there are children who are so unfocused or so hyperactive or so impulsive that there's actually a safety risk. Particularly in really young children, they're like unbuckling the seatbelt and getting out of the car when you're driving down the middle of the interstate, or so that's definitely not good. So safety is a big thing. The second one is learning, but it's not just academic learning. It's cultural, spiritual, social, emotional, all the sorts of things that you have to learn to be able to function as a person in this society. So if it's impacting that learning, I think that's, your focus and you want to do something about that. And then the third would be if it's affecting your self-image. Because if you feel like you're a failure and you're not able to do and whatever, then that's not going to be good for you either.
So safety, learning in all different
areas
of life, and self-image. Okay, got it. So,
and I think as a parent, though, each of us have an idea of kind of what you want your child to learn. I mean, academics is pretty easy, but how do you want your child to develop in other areas? That's different for every family, because every set of parents or family or whatever seems to set that. So again, that goes back to that subjectivity just a little bit. But
yeah, and I think it's really interesting the way you said it. I know some moms will have come up to me and they go, well, he just won't hug people, and say, well, I'm sure he's ADHD because he won't focus on you long enough to give you a hug. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, and you want to go, well, is that really a problem? Is that, because I think that's is that just who you are exactly, or is that really a problem? And I think that's, a big thing. And, unfortunately, we live in a culture right now that, likes to use a lot of interventions and medications and things for everybody. And we're not always quite as accepting of people that don't quite fit our box. And that doesn't help any of this. Now, I'm not saying that that's the whole thing, because ADHD does exist. It definitely does. But I do think that muddies the water when you start to talk about some of this.
I love what you said. That third ingredient. If it affects their self-image, because yeah, that is really important. And there's so many ways we can address ADHD. That's not
Absolutely.
a pill, right?
It is. Well, and in fact, it's real important to know. I mean, obviously, I'm a medical doctor, and my piece of the pie in treating this is using medication. I mean, I do. I'm not going to apologize for that. That's what I do. But I do recognize that that's not the only way that you do that. And in fact, at its best, medicine is probably only going to help somewhere between 30 to 50%.
Wow. Wow. So what other things are there out there?
Well, one is time. I mean, children grow and mature, and if you're doing good parenting and you're exposing them to lots of situations and whatever, things can change. Well, they do change, and they can change positively. Now, unfortunately, they can also change negatively too, and a lot of things can affect that. But it is harder to parent a child with ADHD. It just is. It takes more energy. It takes more things that seem to work for everybody else don't always work for that child, and you have to have an education system that is adaptable, and that's tough because it needs to be adaptable with a certain amount of structure too. Children need boundaries. Well, not just children. I guess we all need boundaries, but definitely need boundaries. But saying you've got to be adaptable within those boundaries sometimes is, that's hard to balance that out.
It is. And given our educational system, I know the burden placed on teachers
is horrific.
It's really difficult. Yeah, it is. And that's why sometimes the best alternative is, in some situations, at least for a temporary period of time, some medication. Yeah.
And again, your hope there is that that'll ameliorate enough of those symptoms that the child can have enough less dysfunction that they can move forward.
Right. Is there a critical time that it should be identified and captured and intervened with at some level?
That's kind of tough, but we say in medicine all the time, the earlier you get to something, it's better. It's better to get in, and I think that's true. But there are children within. We talk so much about autism having a spectrum. Well, everything's got a spectrum. I know. Pneumonia's got a spectrum.
I know.
Yeah. So depending on whether you've got more attention problems, you've got more hyperactivity problems, you've got more impulse problems, that's going to become dysfunctional to you at a different age. The children that are extremely hyperactive and impulsive, by the time they're 2 or 3, you've got those safety concerns. I mean, they are running away from you out in the parking lot, and you're afraid they're going to get hit by a car. I mean, there's so those children, you have to do something right away with them. The children that aren't so hyperactive and aren't so impulsive, a lot of times coast along a little bit because they're not really getting in trouble all that much. Right. And sometimes they're not really picked up until about 3rd grade or so. Ooh. Because what happens then is, but again, they're not really having dysfunction, so is that a problem or not? Yeah. Right. And your hope is you've got good parenting going on, you've got good educational system going on for them, so maybe it's not that big a deal that you've not seen that. But a big thing happens in 3rd grade where they're just required to be a little bit more independent, and so where they're not being, the old saying is you learn to read and then you read to learn kind of thing. Yeah. So when that sort of happens, then they don't have somebody else putting structure on them for that learning, and they have to do it on their own. Yeah. And if they've got a lot of attention problems, sometimes they can really start to flounder, and that will get missed for a little bit because they're not just the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I use lots of cliches, but that's whatever. But they're not causing trouble, and so then finally somebody says, you were really doing well before and now you're not, and what's going on here? And so sometimes it can take a little bit to figure that out.
Oh, I know so many at that 3rd grade level where it is picked up. And I think one thing I've learned is I know a lot of people are so concerned, well, we're going to place Patty on medication, and it doesn't have to be lifelong.
No.
Yeah.
It is for some people because it makes a big difference. It goes back to how much difference is it making for you? How much dysfunction is that making for you? How much do you have to start with? What other skills? Because, we're not all just attention. Everybody's got other traits and skills and things that make up who they are. And some of those things give some people more coping mechanisms and ways to compensate than they do other people. And that's just the way we're made. So
I love that. So unfortunately, it's a very bad habit of mine saying us moms, because that's the generation I grew up, but especially for you dads out there also who are taking care of the kids or loved ones, whatever they may be. And it's so good to know things that we should look for as guardians and parents of our children, to know if maybe that ADHD may be part of one of the things that's making them so unhappy maybe. But it's not an easy disease. It's not straightforward, and it does require an expert to really tease out what component is really a problem, or don't worry about that. Yeah, and that's really I'm so grateful you're here doing that for all. If we have more questions, how do we get a hold of you?
I am with East Tennessee Children's Hospital and with the Developmental Behavioral Center there, which actually is just right across the street from where we are right now. We've moved our offices. And if you get on the Children's Hospital website, you can click on the link that goes to our page for the Developmental Behavioral Center.
Okay, so that's Dr. Deborah Christensen, East Tennessee Children's Hospital, and that's the Behavioral Center. It's so good to see you. I'm so glad to see you. And that's a wrap for today.